Welcome to the Simply Authentic podcast with Angie and Tanya. We are real estate pros, entrepreneurs, leadership gurus, and community enthusiasts. Our passion is sharing our experiences to enrich the lives of others. We hope to inspire you to live authentically.
Simply Authentic is the podcast where realtors and referral partners get the conversations they actually want to hear. I'm Chrystal Forbis with Great American Title, a family-owned and operated title company with over 30 years serving the real estate community. We provide title and escrow services for both Missouri and Kansas, with locations throughout Southwest Missouri. We focus on providing exceptional customer service and trustworthy, reliable title insurance coverage. Our relationships with other industry professionals are why we are able to make dreams come true, one closing at a time. That's why Great American Title is proud to sponsor the Simply Authentic podcast, bringing the most relevant, real, and sometimes challenging conversations that help all of us get better. Tune in, subscribe, and let's keep this industry moving forward together. Simply Authentic, recorded at the Gershman Mortgage Studios, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Simply Authentic podcast. I'm Tanya Murfin.
And I'm Angie Mullings. And today, Tanya, we are talking title work.
Title work, all things title.
And a lot of people just do not understand title work. They don't know what it's about. They don't know about title insurance. So we hope that by the time that we're wrapped up today, that you have a better understanding about what title is, why it's important, why title insurance is important. And hopefully for you realtors out there, you'll have a better understanding about how to actually look at the title work and what should stand out to you. So we're very excited today to have two distinguished guests with us from Great American Title. We have Chrystal Forbis. She is the escrow operations manager, and Lacy Pattyson, who is their quality assurance manager. So welcome
ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks
for coming. Yes, we're excited to get into this. Although some of it is going to be technical, we welcome you to explain it the best that any of us can understand, because even realtors have a hard time understanding some of these terms and technicalities occasionally. So tell us a little bit about each of you and what your background is, how long you've done this, and what other related fields you've been in.
Okay. So I've been in the industry for about 30 years. I actually started in banking when I started college, and then I became a mortgage lender, and I did that for about 19 years. Okay. And then I decided to try this, title. I wanted to understand about the title role, basically, title world. And so I came over here, and I've been doing that for 11 years. Okay. So,
it's a long time.
Been here a minute. Yeah.
And I actually started working at a title company when I was 16. I just started working for a couple hours a day after school, just with some light administrative duties, mailing out recorded docs, making labels for files, and I really liked it. And so I went on full time after graduation. And not long after that, our closer resigned, and so I was just thrust into the escrow world very quickly. And I went ahead and got my degree in accounting and business management, but this has just been a passion, and I liked it. It was a fit. So I stuck with it. I've been with Great American since 2005. And this is kind of all I've done.
It sounds like it. A lifetime of title.
I've had many different roles since I've been here, but I've been here.
Yeah. For our clients, the only thing they ever know is the person that they see across the closing table from them. And what they don't understand is what goes on behind the scenes. And I think both of you have been closers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you've closed at Great American, you may have seen one of these ladies in the past, but you've stayed with the company and grown. And so we're going to talk a lot about what goes on behind the scenes, because that's what people just don't know about.
Right. Agree. So to get us started, tell us and our average listener, what is title insurance and why do we need it?
Okay. So title insurance is basically ensuring that the property's title is clear of any legal issues, liens, or encumbrances before the sale or transfer of the property.
Okay.
That's really what it is.
Right.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that there's not a cloud or any previous bill that
Yes.
maybe the owners have now or even could have been attached at some time in a previous ownership. We want to be sure at closing that there is no cloud
Yes.
on the title.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to do a search of public records to verify that the seller has the right to transfer the ownership.
True. Yeah.
And we're going to protect, both the buyer and the lender in the entire process.
Yes.
We also manage the closing process, handle the documentation, and then provide the title insurance.
And so tell us what the title insurance is for and when it starts and what it covers.
Okay. So for a homeowner or a buyer, the title insurance policy that they purchase at closing covers them up to the date of purchase, the date that title is transferred,
Okay.
With a standard owner's policy. There is an enhanced policy that does cover some title defects going forward. I did not bring notes on that, but we could provide a handout if anybody's interested that really outlines the difference between a standard owner's policy and the enhanced policy.
Okay.
I think the enhanced policy is really a good thing and worth every penny because it protects you going forward too, not just backwards.
Okay.
So yeah, like Chrystal said, the policy is going to protect them if the title company misses something. I mean, really, obviously, we don't ever want to have a claim, but we are all human. And at the end of the day, if there weren't claims, then title insurance underwriters there wouldn't be a business.
Wouldn't be a
right?
reason for it.
Right, there wouldn't be a
You're
reason
right.
for it. So that's on the buyer side. It's going to protect against any clouds on title or liens that don't get paid off or missed at closing.
Okay.
And then for the lender, of course, they're getting a title insurance policy that says they're in first lien position. It ensures that they're in
Right.
first lien position in case they ever have to foreclose on the property.
Okay.
And to be clear, if you're getting a loan, the lender's going to require that you
Yes.
get title
Correct.
insurance,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
I've had people who have paid cash who have said, I don't want title insurance. And I can't imagine taking that kind of a risk,
Me neither.
especially for it's relatively inexpensive compared to other insurance. I just can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same.
And
It
you
pro-
pay.
Yeah,
I'm
go
so
ahead.
sorry. And you pay it one time. It's not like
Right.
your homeowners
Right.
or your car insurance where you have to pay premiums every year or month. You pay it one time, and it protects you for as long as you own the home,
Right.
the property.
Yeah. Very important.
Yeah. So I'd like for you to tell our listeners, just give an example of some things that you have seen as far as clouds on title. I know I've had situations where it was a marital claim that like maybe their divorce decree wasn't recorded properly or whatever, and we've had to chase down exes, right?
Yes.
I've also seen weed liens against properties. So what else do you see on a regular basis or have you seen?
Something we're seeing our underwriters put out, multiple memos on is in 2020. Obviously, some people were unfortunate and they lost their jobs. Therefore, they got behind on their mortgage. And they did what they called or thought was a modification to their current first. What it actually was a second lien on the property. Therefore, when we go to get the payoff, there are two. And so a lot of people do not understand that. They really think they just owe Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank. They don't realize that they have this second payoff with HUD. So that's something that
Interesting.
we have seen.
They weren't required to make monthly payments on
Yeah.
those, but the debt is still owed. And so we've had some
Tacked on.
surprised sellers.
Yeah, I bet.
And it can really change. We're dealing with one now that is large, and it can really change the bottom line for those sellers. So it's
course.
super important to know about, but they did it. They were probably in a high stress situation trying to save their home, and they've forgotten about it.
So this brings to mind, and not a current conversation I'm having with sellers, but it might be a good question for us realtors to ask when we're at the table going over just various things that we talk about. Is your house in a trust? Anything that might affect title.
Yeah.
Asking during the 2020 years when the real estate market, fell and then rose so much, was there any hardships in there that you had to do a loan modification? That's
Yes.
a great tip for us
Yes.
that we've never heard that. I've never heard anybody say that.
And
Yeah.
something to
Yeah.
watch for when you get your title work.
Yeah.
Is there only one deed of trust, or are there two? Did your
Yeah.
seller tell you they're only making one mortgage payment, their only payoff is with Wells Fargo
Yeah.
Yeah.
or whomever, and then you get title work back and you see that second with HUD, that's kind of, halt. Like,
Yeah.
we do have to obviously get that deed of trust released.
Of course.
Yeah.
So the buyers have clear title. And like I said, sometimes sellers don't understand that they actually owe that debt.
Yeah.
For sure.
They have to pay it off. There's a monetary value that has to be paid off at closing.
Yeah.
I would say, the most common thing we see is simple. Like, I purchased this in 2010 and that mortgage still exists with the previous seller. And that's a simple phone call to either the title company that closed it, getting verification that it was paid off, and then the proof, and then getting with the bank for that release, because releases do get
Missed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had
You know,
that happen.
But
Yeah.
sometimes I would say some of the hardest things for us to clear are like a situation where it was an owner financed, a seller finances the loan and then they've passed away, something like that. So there's different circumstances, but
Yeah.
that's something difficult. So
Yeah. And as far as you mentioned, Angie, a divorce, change in marital status, and we've both seen people have to be chased down to come back, ex-spouses, and that's not always a pleasant conversation. So what potentially happened, do you think, with a lot of those? Were the right paperwork just not recorded? Or the recorded paperwork maybe didn't match what the decree said?
Yeah, a lot of people do not understand that in the state of Missouri, if you are married and you purchase, let's say you're in the middle of a divorce, but you go ahead and you purchase a property, it's a marital interest state. And so your spouse still has marital interest until that divorce is final and official, with the courts. And then after that, a quitclaim deed would be recorded, removing that spouse, from the property.
Yes.
So that's something we see a lot where they just don't understand.
And I would say this is not that unusual to see the quitclaim deed that was prepared by maybe not a title company in a closing transaction. Maybe it was prepared by an attorney through the divorce, and it doesn't state the marital status of the spouse. And so we need it re-executed, and now they're married.
Yeah.
So
That's
where
another
some-
complication.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've also seen troubles with death. So somebody dies, and then there are actually previous wives or husbands that have interest in that. Whereas that, at the time of their death, the family believes, no, they were divorced 25 years
Right.
ago. But something didn't get recorded correctly, and now they have an interest in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's difficult.
Very difficult.
And might
yes.
be, do you ever have anything that's impossible?
Yeah, I mean,
Like, we cannot get this
we
to
cannot
happen.
clear this. Yes, I mean, unfortunately with liens sometimes. So if you've, like I stated before, let's say it was a seller owner finance.
Right.
And they have passed. There are certain rules per our underwriters that we have to wait multiple years after that note would mature. And a lot of times that, there's nobody that can release that except for
Right.
the owner.
That's right.
And so I would say that's probably a situation.
Yeah.
Most are fixable. We had
Right.
two sisters one time that decided to purchase property next door to each other. Great idea. But then they decided to build a garage in the middle.
Oh, no.
And not even thinking about this encroachment on both of their properties. So one of them had to do a survey, and they had to put their house and the garage on that, and that was a beautiful piece of property. But then the other, unfortunately, had a very tiny lot because, it was an encroachment.
Yes.
And so situations like that, if they're willing to do
Yeah.
it,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a nightmare. You're like,
And a nightmare, yes.
Yeah.
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 Some screaming behind the scenes.
No kidding.
You know, there's also tax liens. I mean, you
Yes.
see that quite often, right? And when someone tells me that they think they have a lien or that they had a lien, but now they've paid it off, I always encourage them to get a pre. Now I just lost my train of thought.
Like a title search?
Title search,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, right up front before we even list it. Because obviously we're doing seller proceed sheets when we list, and we want to know that the seller's going to walk away with X amount of money and that they're comfortable with that, with what we're listing at. And if they think that there could be a lien, it might be a good idea for us to call a title company and get that up
Highly
front.
recommend that. No surprises. Then going forward, some people will come in with a death situation and they'll be like, my father passed away. I don't have a clue. I don't know what's on here. And that's what we always recommend, because then we can start right then, right? They might have to go through probate or something, but at least we're getting them started down the correct path.
Right.
Very important. And just to know, peace of mind of knowing.
Peace of mind,
Go ahead of time.
Yes. Yeah.
Us too. I mean, it gives
Well,
us
of
peace
course.
of mind
Oh,
'cause
sure.
I know I can help them.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's very nerve-wracking when someone walks in and they say, oh, I just ran into this person on the street. They want to sell me this property. And, of course, all my red flags are going up.
Right.
But it might be totally legit and fine.
Yeah.
So,
True. How do you come up with what the cost is for a title policy? What is that based on?
Sure. So title insurance premiums are filed in the state of Missouri. They're filed by title insurance underwriters. So our underwriters file a schedule of rate premiums with the Department of Insurance. As a title insurance agent, we have to collect those filed rates.
Okay.
Okay. And the title premiums are based on the sales price and or loan amount, depending on
Right.
if it's a purchase with financing or a refi or whatever.
Yeah.
Regarding any other title fees, with the exception of recording fees, which obviously are set by the state, those are at the discretion of the title company.
Okay. Okay. That tells a lot. And if you were talking to a newer realtor and they were to say, look, this title policy you just sent me is a big bunch of garbage that I have no idea what it says, other than it's got a parcel legal description, and I think you've got my parties on here, correct? What else does this mean?
I would first suggest, hey, let us come in and do a little training.
Yes.
Because that is priceless. I
Yes.
mean, relationships, they're key in what we do. And that is one big way to build it, is start with an agent that is brand new and they're just learning, and be their resource. I always, we want to make everybody in the transaction look as good as they can at that closing table. And so fool everybody, let them, think they've been doing it for years and years. And so if we educate them and help them with the title commitment, then they would know. And we're happy to come in and do a training. But I would say there's many places to look, but most importantly, look at who's vested. Look at, does your seller have the right to sell this property? Believe it or not, a lot of times we do get those contracts in and we're like, who's this? This is the owner, and so we're trying to put those pieces together.
Yeah.
And then there's two areas of a commitment. Looks a lot, it looks a lot more than it is.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but there are two main areas: your requirements and your exceptions. Your requirements are going to be met to move forward with the property, the new buyer, to move forward with the property with no liens or anything like that moving forward. Your exceptions, though, are going to stay on the property. So CC&Rs, an easement, a utility easement, something like that. There's nothing that we can do about those. Those are going to stay on the property forever. So that would be my quick version, of what to look for.
Yeah.
And I think the exceptions are often overlooked. People don't think about looking there. They grab their, Schedule A and see, my sellers are
Right.
sellers. They do own the property.
Right.
And they look at their requirements. Oh, good. They've only got one payoff and there's no tax liens. We're good to go. But the exceptions mean a lot to the buyer. You know, they might not have known that there were CCRs on the property, or there is a setback line or a utility easement that might hinder them from moving forward with plans they had made, you know,
Good
with
point.
the property. So the exceptions are something they should definitely go over too.
Yeah.
So just for our listener, CC&Rs, that's your covenants and restrictions. So if you're in a subdivision, very often there are covenants and restrictions, and the use of your property will be limited to what those CC&Rs cover. So so that's going to be an exception, like you said. Couple of things there. For CC&Rs, you guys have records of what every subdivision in just Greene County or beyond Greene County?
No, beyond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there's a question, if a client out there has a question about whether they can put up an 8-foot fence, you know, ask your realtor to get a copy of the CC&Rs. And if the listing agent doesn't have them, the title company in Great American could pull that for
We
you.
get requests all the time
Yeah.
for a copy of the CCRs, oftentimes like when somebody's looking at signing a contract, you know,
Yeah.
for a listing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about trusts? So if I go on an appointment and I fail to ask that question, and honestly, sometimes people can't remember if it's in a trust, you
I
know,
get
so even
that.
if you've asked it and they say, no, Bob and Jane own it, you know, then title work gets pulled and it's in a trust. What documentation do you need for that property to be sold out of that trust?
The only thing that we require is the most simplified answer is a certificate of trust. So all that is something an attorney would prepare, and they basically would state the name of the trust and who the trustees of the trust are, if they're able to, you know, sell the real estate in the trust, that sort of thing.
Right.
Sometimes that is not prepared, and so then there are certain sections of the trust that we would ask to get a copy of.
Okay.
But we do have to have either or, because we have to know that it's okay, you know, who can sign and that it's okay to do this.
Okay. And then buying in a trust. Do you need any part of the trust to be able to purchase in the trust?
Same thing,
Yeah.
either the certificate of the
Okay.
trust, which the most important thing for buyers is either the certificate of the trust or a section in their trust agreement should spell out how they should hold title to the property.
Okay.
That's,
Very
you know,
important.
and that the trust has the powers to purchase, mortgage, real estate, you know, et
Sure.
cetera. So
Yeah.
you want to see the powers of the trust, who the trustees are, and how they should hold title to real estate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to back up. I knew there was two things I wanted to ask about,
Okay.
and I remembered one,
Okay.
and I forgot the other. The other was, let's say that title work comes back and there is a problem. What is your process? Do you pick up the phone and call? What's your process for handling that?
We would pick up the phone and call. We're going to try to solve that without involving anyone else, if at all possible.
Okay.
Sometimes we do have to go back to the previous title company that did the sale, and so they would have probably issued the owner's policy, and then we would rely on them to assist us. But I would say, we try to solve it on our own without going that direction.
And does it happen a lot that you have to go back to that previous owner's
No.
policy?
No, most problems
Okay.
we can solve.
Okay.
It's something easy to solve as long as you can find all the people. I would say
Right.
that's your hardest thing, is when you're going back
Yeah.
in the chain, maybe a couple owners, that can get difficult. But
Yeah.
if you start calling and you start asking, people know people,
Yeah.
and
You're right.
most
Yeah.
of the time it can be solved with some work, a little bit of work.
Yeah.
And Facebook.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah,
Online
right.
We all
investigating, right?
stalk,
Trying to
yeah.
find somebody.
Stalk, investigate.
I always
We-
say we
we've
put
done
our
more than once.
investigator hat
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Because, you have to. I'll
You're
be
right.
like, let's think through this. And,
Somebody
how
from
can we
two
get there?
owners ago back in the chain that we need to get something
Yeah.
cleaned up, and
Yeah.
you hunt them down.
Yeah.
You hunt them down.
Yeah.
We had mentioned tax liens, you did a few minutes ago, and when there is a tax lien found on a property, does that become first place over the mortgage holder? Ooh, have I stumped you?
You have. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I would
Bet
have to
you it
defer
does.
to our
I've always
title department
heard
manager.
that it does.
I have too.
And
Yeah.
you guys can get back to us, and we'll put
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
Facebook,
Yeah.
Yes.
post on
Yes.
question answer.
Yeah.
But I've always heard that it does. But I can't. I've had agents have tax lien problems, but they were much bigger than, this seller is selling and has a tax lien and a mortgage. It was it was like a previous owner tax lien, not even the current owner.
Yeah.
Something that got missed or attached later or something, who really knows? But
When they're delinquent on their taxes and it gets sold on the courthouse steps, it creates a lot.
yes.
A lot.
Yeah.
To learn and, you
Yeah.
know, that's something you should know all the ins and outs before you purchase
right.
something on the courthouse steps.
Yes. Yes.
And many times, for those people who show up with cash on hand to buy those houses, you don't know that situation unless they've called you and said, "Can you do a preliminary search for me?" Right?
Yes. Yes. And we do see that, but it's always a rush. You know, because they're like, we just
course.
found out this is selling tomorrow.
Right.
But still, even if there isn't anything, there are certain rules, that even though they've paid it, the owner of the property still has the right to come back and pay their taxes.
True.
Yes.
Yeah. That's true.
And once you purchase property at a tax sale, you can't get title insurance for a certain amount of time, and certain requirements have to be met. So if you're going to purchase property at a tax sale and you're intending on turning around and selling it in a few years, the buyer, especially if they're getting a mortgage, and so the lender's going to require title insurance, they might not be able to.
Okay.
And I don't
that
know.
is
I'm not
something
certainly
I
not
didn't
an expert
know.
on that either. So I don't want to give
It's
you
just
facts on
something,
the
they wanna
timelines and
research.
stuff. But.
So that would be a question for the buyer of that house that got foreclosed on or sold on the courthouse steps or whatever the situation. The buyer would need to ask you not only maybe to do a preliminary title search, but and they may do that afterwards. Who knows? They may purchase and then do the title search.
Right.
But they would need to know and ask that question: can you insure this property for me?
Correct.
And can the next buyer, because most of these people who buy those houses on the courthouse steps, most of them are flipping them, right?
Yes.
Well, they might keep them as a rental,
Yes.
but a lot of them are flipping them and
that's
reselling them
what
in
we
90 days or less if they can.
And
So,
they might run into issues
Yeah.
with the end buyer being able to purchase title insurance.
Yes.
okay, didn't know that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Tanya, I think it's a good time to take a break.
it
What do you
is.
think?
Ladies, let's take a break.
We need to hear from
Okay.
our sponsors. And we're back.
We're back with Great American Title. Lacy and Chrystal are with us today. So if you're just tuning in, you're going to want to rewind this episode. It is all about title work and why and all of the issues that could come up possibly and or how to pivot from those issues. So thank you for educating us today.
Yeah.
I have a question about death. So if you have a couple that owns a house and one of the spouses dies, what are they going to have to supply to be able to sell that house?
We prefer the death certificate, and
Okay.
we will record that.
Okay.
But we also can do a death recital on the warranty deed.
Okay.
So
All right.
That's
so
it.
a couple ways to deal with it.
Yeah, it's pretty
Okay.
easy.
Straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question about one time I closed on a property and I represented the seller, but I had represented her as a buyer, and there was a weed lien, and that doesn't mean they were smoking weed in the property. That means
I mean, it could these days.
it could, it might. But it means their yard got too tall, and the city had to come and mow that yard, and then once compensation for that, they charged the seller, and the seller of the property did not pay that weed lien, but it wasn't caught when she purchased.
Okay.
It was caught when she went to sell. Now, thankfully, it was only like $60 or something. But so my question is, are there different types of searches that different title companies do, or
No, I mean
Okay.
different areas that we search. I would say.
And something like that should be picked up.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was a situation where the lien hadn't been filed.
That's what I was
yet.
wondering.
okay,
Um,
okay.
maybe
We also have
it's
different
cross-filed
plants title plants. You know, you build
True.
your title plants. So,
Yeah.
but that was what I was going to say. Was it recorded or filed at the time of the closing?
Right.
Or was it after?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there would be a recording date on it, right? Just
Yeah.
in case you
Filed.
wanted to get to the bottom of it and say, you know, it just so happens this weed lien was recorded after her date of purchase.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's something else that we do behind the scenes that you might not know is you've got your title commitment that was issued as of a certain date, and you've got your effective date. But right before closing, we do a pre-clear, so we do a gap search from the date of the
Okay.
effective date of the commitment
Yeah.
to that day.
Okay.
So we make sure nothing else has been filed right before closing.
Yeah.
Okay. And does your commitment date go back to the date of the contract, or does it start the date it's completed in the company, in your company?
It's
It-
the date it's completed.
Okay.
And your effective date might be a couple days prior to when we actually did our search, because the records, the title plant or online records might only be updated as of a couple days ago.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. Okay. How big is Great American Title? How many
I was just
locations do
thinking
you
about
have?
that. Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
13 escrow offices.
Okay.
And then our headquarters is here in Springfield.
Okay.
Okay.
So your title plant is here in Springfield?
Correct.
Okay. Very good.
And on staff, you guys have talk to our listeners about how many positions there are. Not necessarily how many, but like you have attorneys on staff. Yes.
We have an attorney. We
Okay.
don't have one on staff, but
Okay.
we have a real estate attorney that we would refer to, you know,
Okay.
if we needed him.
Okay.
Okay.
But not on staff. We have a little under, I think, 100 employees. One really cool thing about Great American Title is we have different processes and steps for extra.
Next,
What's the-
separation of duties.
Yes,
Okay.
separation of
Yeah.
duties. So,
Gotcha.
for example, if I close a file, I am going to give my paperwork to our post-closing department. This is all behind scenes while you guys are still, you know, conversing with the buyer and the seller. We go ahead and send them our documentation, and they're reviewing that, and then they actually fund and disperse the checks.
Okay.
So we do not do that
it.
on our own, and so it's something.
It's kind of a system of checks and
Yes.
balances and a separation of duties between departments that I think is not just unique to us, but it is unique to. We've grown to a size where we were able to do that. Where sometimes
Got
smaller
it.
title companies, you might
Yeah.
not see those different departments that we
Okay.
have in place.
Okay.
Something our underwriter appreciates because we do have multiple eyes, you know,
Right.
on it.
And
So
I think it's something our escrow staff and closers
Yes.
appreciate too,
Yes.
not having to fund their own files or record
Yes.
their own documents or do their own policies, which
Yeah.
I've
No
done
kidding.
that before.
Right.
I did that, you know,
Yeah.
15 years ago. I
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did it all, so it's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 13 offices. And so how many counties are you serving in that?
We serve all of.
Yeah.
We can do title insurance in Kansas and Missouri, any
Oh,
county,
okay.
anywhere in the
So
entire
anywhere.
state.
Okay.
Okay.
We have offices from Joplin, Springfield, down to Branson, up to Lake of the Ozarks, and kind of everywhere in between. So,
Okay.
but we can do title insurance and closings for any counties in Kansas or Missouri.
Okay.
Okay. Good to know.
I have had a long-standing relationship with Great American Title and have used mostly the Nixa office. I've been everywhere, but Sherry Doran has been my closer for many years down there. And Linda Smith, one of your
Yes.
former employees, a great friend of mine. I just want to give you guys some props for helping agents and helping buyers and sellers when there is a problem. And I have had personal conversations with your examiners to understand, you know, what something meant and what it was and how it got there and how to resolve it. So, yeah, so it's important. We're going to talk about relationships, and you mentioned earlier this is a relationship business that not only do realtors rely on you guys to help us, our clients out of situations, but personal situations sometimes arise too.
Absolutely.
And so I've, spoken to the examiner before, and he's given me a lot of good advice. So appreciate you guys and the hard work you do, and
Thank
you know,
you.
Thank
behind
you.
the scenes how you help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
take a lot of
take
pride,
pride in
in
that.
offering exceptional customer service. We really push that and take pride in that.
We
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about maybe a little bit about 1031 exchange. Now, 1031 exchange is something that is very involved, and we may have to have you guys back to have a different conversation, a more
Yeah.
in-depth conversation, because, you know, we do have, as an aging society, we have a lot of people out there who maybe have built a portfolio of several properties, and they're wondering how they can cash out on one, but they don't want to pay all the taxes on that. And the rules change on 1031s all the time. So I always tell my client, I am not the expert. I mean, I know just a little bit, but we're going to get you with somebody who can really walk you through that. And I know you guys have been good. You've come over to my office and talked about 1031 exchanges and really helped us understand what we need to know so that we can further help our clients, because that's what it's all about. So
Yes.
talk a little bit about what a 1031 is, and maybe just some things you've seen with that.
Okay, so a 1031 exchange is a tax strategy that investors can use to defer paying capital gains taxes when they're selling an investment property with the intention of using the proceeds from that sale to reinvest in the purchase of more investment property. It has to be a like-kind exchange, and I get that question a lot. What is like-kind? If I sold an apartment complex, do I have to buy an apartment complex? No. Real estate is like-kind to real estate. So if you sell an apartment complex, you could buy undeveloped land, or
okay.
you could sell undeveloped land and purchase a commercial building, you know. So
Okay.
real estate is like-kind to real estate.
Okay.
And another thing is you're deferring your capital gains taxes. You're kind of kicking the can down the road, right?
Right.
Because you're reinvesting.
Right.
That's one thing. You're not getting out of paying taxes forever.
Forever. Right.
But you can defer that. Okay.
Right,
So
right.
eventually you're going to have to cash out, and somebody's
Right.
going to have to pay taxes. That, I think, is another thing that's kind of misunderstood.
Yes.
So for us, what we do in the 1031 exchange process is we act as the qualified intermediary for the exchanger. We make sure that the exchange complies with the IRS's safe harbor rules.
Okay.
So the IRS regulations state you have to have a qualified intermediary. The exchanger cannot be in possession of the proceeds. So they have to be held in an account that is handled by the qualified intermediary. So as the QI, we facilitate the sale of the relinquished property, hold the funds until they're ready for to close on their replacement property. And we work with the title company. It's not always Great American Title. We can do 1031 exchanges through our company, Asset Transition, and work with any title company. And we often do. A lot of times there's somebody selling property here and purchasing something in Florida.
True.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we work
True.
work with title companies all over the United States,
Okay.
and just make sure that the investor is compliant with those IRS regulations. There are deadlines that have to be met, and the settlement statement has to be set up a certain way, and certain documents. So,
Do you get frequent phone calls from the public that need to or want to do a 1031
Yes.
exchange?
yes.
I would think that would be a common question.
Yes,
Yes.
and we have a lot of repeat customers.
Yeah.
Like I said, it is not uncommon at all for us to be handling a 1031 exchange that Great American Title isn't maybe closing.
Right. Got
Of
it.
course, it makes the process a lot easier when it's internal, but
Sure.
we're happy to work with any title company.
Yeah,
so.
because you can, being the intermediary, you can manage the money and be the escrow account to hold that money, and then they're actually buying in Florida, like you
Yes.
said, and they're
Yes.
closing down there.
Yes.
Got it.
And
Okay.
one thing another thing that comes up more often than I'd like to see is you've got to have this done and set up ahead of time. You can't close and get your check and then, oh, my buddy or my
Yeah.
attorney said I need to do a 1031. Can we
Right.
set that up? No, we can't after the fact. Everything is
Right.
done. Make sure you've got those things lined out ahead of time,
Yeah.
because once you are in receipt of those funds, we can't backtrack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those IRS rules that you were kind of talking about, I mean, you've got to identify a property.
Yeah.
You can identify up
Yep.
to 3 properties, and then you have to meet certain deadlines to
Yep.
close and that kind of thing.
And
so
we're going to be able to line all that out ahead of time. So when they close on the sale of their relinquished property, they understand those deadlines. If we haven't heard from them and our 45-day window is coming up, we're going to reach out and remind them, have you changed your mind? Did you not find any replacement property? We'll help keep them in line so they make sure and comply with those regulations.
That's good.
yeah.
How often do you have somebody not follow the rules or try to get involved and make decisions that you all have to control, like the money, the escrow,
I don't think we have people who try to go outside of those regulations. We just have people who don't understand
Right.
the rules.
Yeah.
And I think most people, they don't want to mess with the IRS.
Right.
So we don't have pushback.
The
very
implication
often.
is big. Yeah.
I mean, they
Yeah.
might have had something in mind, and sometimes the rules
yeah.
don't fall in line with what they were planning, and there is some disappointment. But that's why I prefer that we talk to people ahead of time before they close on their relinquished property. Don't
Yeah.
go into it blind. Ask the questions up front before you close.
Yeah.
Make sure you understand your deadlines and identifying property, because there are different rules.
Yeah.
I won't go into that because we could spend an hour
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah,
it. But
for sure.
That's why we may have to do another episode about 1031s, because they are. I don't think the general public really knows much, or they again just know what it's called, and they think that it's a tax break, or they think
Yeah.
it's a tax. What you said in the beginning with it being, you're going to be taxed at some point. It's just not right now.
Yeah.
Not today.
And it could be your heirs end up
Yeah.
being taxed
Yes.
for that, or
Yeah.
your estate is taxed. So it's going to happen. But I think that my general rule of thumb, and when I'm talking to my agents and training them, is if you're having a conversation with a client who thinks they want to do a 1031, then we need to put them in contact with the title company
Yes.
right away, so that I don't want the liability of telling them wrong on these dates and
Yeah.
these timelines, because that is so critical to them being successful in that exchange.
Yeah, and that's another thing. We get a lot of questions about whether or not their particular situation, whether it's a good fit for their particular situation financially. We are not their CPA.
Yeah.
We are
Right.
not their attorney. So we can tell them the rules and what we have to do to comply and make sure they're set up,
Right.
for a successful exchange. But when we're talking crunching numbers, they need to get with their CPA or a tax attorney. Like, we recommend that often. That's a lot of the questions that we get. They're
Yeah.
trying to
Sure.
crunch numbers, and we're not going to be able to offer them advice on whether
Yeah.
it fits their particular situation.
Yeah.
So
Everybody's so different.
yeah.
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 Exactly.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about leadership on the podcast, and both of you are in a leadership role. You've both been through multiple areas of the company. So tell us what it's like to manage and be a part of a large organization like yours, and what you've learned most through the years about trying to lead people the best way. We all learn from our mistakes the
Yeah.
best, right? But what have you learned from being in your leadership roles about dealing with other people?
Lacy and I both try to be very available to the escrow staff and others. Lacy's, I just have the escrow staff, but she has really the whole company that depend on her for certain questions and answers. And so we try to be available. I think that's the key, but obviously we're just, we're two people.
Right.
And so if it's urgent, we really want to be there for them, because obviously someone on the other side is our client, our customer.
Right.
That needs to get their check. The seller needs to get their check. They need to get out the door, that kind of thing. And so with the computers, they're great when they work and everything flows, but sometimes there's just a little hiccup that they might need us to help with. I think back to relationships. Relationships are key in everything that we do, in every aspect, in my opinion, including I need to have relationships with the escrow staff so they feel comfortable to come to me with suggestions, problems, either internally or, it might be a personal problem that they need to discuss, and they need to understand that I'm going to keep that confidential. Or handling situations. We have a lot of two people offices, you know,
Sure.
and so you have to handle that really carefully. Sure. But I think the main thing that I've learned is people want to be appreciated.
Yes.
I try to understand their love language. You know, a lot of people don't know theirs, but if you pay attention, you can quickly figure it out. And I try to pay attention to that and then reward them accordingly. Definitely not perfect, but that's what I want. And so, you know, and I think all of us want a pat on the back. It might not be publicly, but you know, we all want that. And so that's what I try to do, is just be there, support them, listen, and be someone that they can trust and know that maybe they just need to vent. You know, maybe it's just a bad day. What we do is really stressful at times. You know, we try to go into the closing room and because it's such an exciting day. It's a huge transaction. We rarely do anything bigger in our lives. Right. And so it's a huge thing to be a part of. And that's what I love. I love seeing that first-time home buyer sitting there with their baby, you know, and you just know that they're going to go love it. They're going to love having a house and everything that comes with it. So,
I think she hit the nail on the head for me with fostering relationships with our employees, creating an environment where they trust us, where we're make ourselves available to them. They know we're going to have their back and support them, and they can come to us with issues without being fearful of consequences. We're going to help them through it and help them figure it out. I tried to help them sometimes figure it out on their own so they can grow, you know, and learn. And I think that goes really far. Without that, I can't effectively communicate with them, you know, and we're not working towards a common goal. If we don't have a relationship and there's not trust between us and they don't know I've got their back, then we're not working towards a common goal, right? And at the end of the day, we're all working together as a team. And I just don't, I don't think you can do that without those relationships.
Agreed.
And those relationships extend to the realtors that you serve and that kind of thing. I think Tanya and I probably both do this when we have new agents and we're training them. We're going to tell them that one of the most important things you can do is create those relationships with lenders that you trust, with title companies that you trust. We cannot do our job without all these ancillary services. And as you said, we hope that the most exciting day is closing day. We want everybody to walk away just feeling really good, but there are hiccups, there are ups and downs. This is not it's not always a perfect transaction. As much as we would love to make it that way, there are things that are beyond our control. And I really, what's interesting about what you guys do is that we've dealt with our clients, both sides, we've dealt with the other realtor all along. You guys sometimes don't see us until we are at or don't communicate, really, no reason to communicate until we get to the closing table. What I always try to do is if there is an issue, I try to let my closing company know because I don't want anybody blindsided, right? Yeah. I want you to know that this is a divorce situation. It's been a struggle from the get-go. It's so that you can be mentally prepared because you're all going about your day thinking, yay, we're going to close a deal today.
And we're walking in with a landmine.
We're going to offer 2 separate closing times, you know, because we don't want anyone to be uncomfortable any more than we want to be. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So most of the time I'll be like, well, why don't they come in at 3? You're coming in at 4. You know, let's make this convenient. We can still get the money. If it's a seller, we can still get the money to you. You know, I can even alert you once everybody's left. There are ways to handle that.
Yes.
There's also situations where people are more of a reader. They're going to want to read every document, which is totally fine. But sometimes an hour doesn't warrant for that.
That's
so, you guys are really great about giving us a heads up, and that way we can send them the packet before they
ahead
get
of time.
Even though nothing can really be changed at that point, but at least they can get an understanding.
And ask questions ahead of time if they have them. All of those things make our relationships with one another imperative for a
Yes.
successful closing.
Yes.
So you're right. All of those things. I was sitting there thinking when she was talking about a divorce situation, and I was thinking about the reader.
Yes.
Yeah.
The reader.
Yeah.
You're going to need to send that out a couple days ahead, maybe a week sometimes.
Yeah, there'll be sometimes we
Right.
send in backup because, you know, that closer might be back to back to back all
True.
day.
Oh, yes.
And we don't want to make a big deal or make them uncomfortable.
Right.
But it definitely affects our day. And so we might send in another closer to sit with them, or we might even say, we're going to give you the room for a minute.
Yep.
Let us know when you feel comfortable proceeding,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So.
And I really appreciate that. I'll never forget, I had a new agent come to me right after his first closing, and he said, I'll never go back there. And I said, why? And he said, because she explained nothing. She just shoved the piece of paper over to them and said, sign here, sign here, sign here. And we all do this every day, right? This is something that we're used to. When we stop having the ability to understand that the person sitting across from us is not that, we should hang it up, because we're not doing a service. We are actually doing a disservice to them. They need to understand what they're
Agreed.
You
signing.
have to read the room the second you walk in, and it's been a long time since I've done closings, but usually within a minute. You can tell,
Yes.
you know, if they need, if they want every document explained, or are they an investor who's done this 100 times and they just want to sign and get out and on to their next meeting. But for those first-time home buyers or somebody who's in a situation like a divorce or something, they might have a lot of questions, and they might really need you to take the time to go over everything and make them feel comfortable through the closing. So
So true. Got to read the room.
Yes.
Know your
So
audience.
important.
yes. Know your audience. Yes.
Know your audience.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. Thank
Yes.
you.
It's been
It's been
Thank you for
amazing
having you.
and a real education for us. So we hope that our listeners gather that as well.
Good.
Yeah.
And we just want to say to the listeners, please like and follow us on social media and on YouTube. And share this episode with a friend if you think they're getting ready to purchase a house, or you know they've had a bad experience, or you just, you know, need to educate a friend. Send it, please. Share it.
And we want to thank Gershman Mortgage for allowing us to record here. And we want to thank Great American Title for being our premier sponsor.
Yes. Thank you, Great
Thank you
American.
for partnering with
Appreciate
us.
you.
We appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. Find today's full video by searching the Simply Authentic podcast on YouTube. Hit subscribe, and there you will find full videos of every episode.